The French Revolution, a tale of liberty and chaos. In the late 18th century, the world watched as France, a nation of grandeur and tradition, was swept into a storm of change. The French Revolution was not just a political upheaval, it was a seismic shift that would echo across continents and centuries. It was a time of hope and horror, of dreams and nightmares, of liberty and chaos. Today we journey through the dramatic story of the French Revolution. We'll explore its causes, its key events, the figures who shaped it, the turning points that defined it, and the aftermath that changed the world forever. Let us begin. To truly understand the French Revolution, we must first immerse ourselves in the world that gave rise to it, a world teetering on the edge of dramatic change, where every street and palace echoed with the tensions of the time. By the late 1780s, France was a nation in deep crisis. The bustling streets of Paris masked a society plagued by hardship and uncertainty. The air was thick with anxiety, as rumors of unrest and hardship spread from the city's crowded alleys to its grandest boulevards. At the heart of this turmoil was the monarchy, led by King Louis XVI. The royal court, ensconced in the opulent halls of Versailles, was drowning in debt. Much of it the result of costly wars, including France's support for the American Revolution and the extravagant spending of the royal family. The king's attempts at reform were half-hearted and often blocked by powerful interests, leaving the nation's finances in shambles. Meanwhile, ordinary people suffered under the weight of crushing taxes and relentless food shortages. Bread, the staple of the French diet, became scarce and expensive, forcing families to wait in long lines for a meager loaf. Hunger and desperation became daily companions for the majority of the population. The contrast between the glittering lives of the aristocracy and the misery of the poor had never been more stark. While nobles feasted in candlelit halls, peasants struggled to survive just outside their gates. This glaring inequality fueled anger and resentment, as the privileged few seemed oblivious to the suffering of the many. French society was rigidly divided into three estates or social classes, each with its own rights and privileges. This system, unchanged for centuries, was now a source of growing frustration. The first estate, made up of the clergy, and the second estate, the nobility, enjoyed immense privileges. They owned vast lands, paid little to no taxes, and wielded significant influence over the king and government. Their lives were marked by luxury and power, far removed from the struggles of ordinary people. The third estate, comprising everyone else from humble peasants and urban workers to the rising class of merchants and professionals, bore the overwhelming burden of taxation. Despite making up nearly 98% of the population, they had almost no political power or voice in how the country was run. Their frustration grew as they watched the privileged few prosper at their expense. At the same time, new ideas were spreading across France. The Enlightenment, a movement championing reason, equality and individual rights, began to challenge the old order. In salons and coffeehouses, people debated the writings of philosophers who dared to question tradition and authority. Thinkers like Voltaire, Rousseau, and Montesquieu inspired people to imagine a different future, one where justice, liberty, and equality were possible. Their words ignited hope, and stirred a desire for change among the oppressed and educated alike. The recent success of the American Revolution had shown the world that it was possible to overthrow a king and build a new society based on democratic ideals. In France, this example fanned the flames of discontent. Protests and riots became more frequent as the people grew restless and emboldened by the possibility of real change. The stage was set for revolution. The old world was crumbling and a new one was about to be born, one forged in the fires of anger, hope, and the unyielding demand for justice. In 1789, the crisis in France reached a breaking point. Years of economic hardship, food shortages, and growing resentment toward the monarchy had pushed the people to the edge. The streets of Paris buzzed with rumors and tension, as ordinary citizens wondered what the future would hold. The king, Louis XVI, faced mounting pressure from all sides, and the old order seemed increasingly fragile. In a desperate attempt to address the crisis, the king called together the Estates General, a meeting of representatives from all three estates, clergy, nobility, and commoners. This assembly had not been convened for 175 years, and its gathering was a sign of just how dire the situation had become. Hopes ran high that real change might finally be possible. But the Third Estate, representing the vast majority of the French population, quickly grew frustrated by their lack of influence and the resistance of the privileged classes. Refusing to be silenced, they broke away and boldly declared themselves the National Assembly. In a dramatic moment, they took the famous tennis court oath, vowing not to disband until they had written a new constitution for France. This act of defiance electrified the nation. Tensions continued to rise, and on July 14, 1789, the people of Paris erupted in open revolt. Armed with whatever weapons they could find, they stormed the Bastille, a medieval fortress and prison that loomed over the city. The Bastille was more than just a building, it was a powerful symbol of royal tyranny and oppression. The fall of the Bastille sent shockwaves through France and across Europe. Crowds celebrated in the streets, waving the new tricolor flag and embracing the hope of a new era. The revolution had truly begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The king and his court were stunned, and the world watched as the people of France seized their destiny. News of the uprising spread rapidly to the countryside, where peasants, long burdened by feudal dues and oppressive landlords, rose up in what became known as the Great Fear. They attacked the homes of nobles, burned records of debts and obligations, and demanded an end to centuries of injustice. The old social order was under attack from every direction. In response to the chaos, the National Assembly moved swiftly. They abolished feudal privileges, ending the legal inequalities that had divided French society for generations. Soon after, they issued the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a bold document proclaiming liberty, equality, and fraternity as the new guiding principles of the nation. These revolutionary ideas would inspire people far beyond France's borders. The old order was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Aristocratic mansions stood empty, royal symbols were toppled, and the power of the monarchy was fading fast. The world was witnessing the birth of a new France, forged in the fires of revolution. But the path ahead would be anything but smooth. The revolution had unleashed powerful forces, and the struggle for the soul of France was only just beginning. As the revolution gathered momentum, the streets of Paris became a stage for history. Ordinary citizens, once voiceless, now found themselves swept up in a tide of change. In this charged atmosphere, new leaders emerged, each with their own vision for France's future. Maximilien Robespierre, a lawyer and passionate advocate for the people, rose to prominence. Known for his incorruptible reputation and sharp intellect, Robespierre became the face of the revolution's radical phase. He believed in virtue, equality, and the power of the people, but also in the necessity of harsh measures to defend the revolution from its enemies. Alongside him stood Georges Danton, a fiery orator whose booming voice could rally crowds to action. Danton was charismatic and pragmatic, urging the people to defend their hard-won freedoms. He inspired hope and courage, but also knew when compromise was needed. Jean-Paul Marat, a radical journalist, called for ever more drastic action. Through his newspapers, Marat stirred the public with passionate articles, demanding justice for the oppressed and punishment for those he saw as traitors. His words fueled the revolution's most intense moments. Meanwhile, King Louis XVI, feeling the ground shift beneath him, tried to flee the country with his family. Disguised and desperate, he hoped to find safety and support abroad. But his escape was foiled, and he was captured at Varennes, brought back to Paris in disgrace. The king's failed flight shattered any remaining trust between the monarchy and the people. The monarchy's days were numbered, royal symbols were stripped from public spaces, and the once mighty throne now stood empty, a relic of a fading era. In 1792, the National Convention declared France a republic. The air was electric with hope and uncertainty as crowds filled the streets, celebrating the birth of a new nation built on liberty, equality, and fraternity. But the revolution soon took a darker turn. The king was put on trial for treason, found guilty, and executed by guillotine before a stunned and divided crowd. His death marked a point of no return. The world watched in shock as the ancient monarchy fell. News of the king's execution spread rapidly, sending ripples of fear and inspiration across Europe and beyond. But the revolution was spinning out of control. Political factions, from moderates to radicals, clashed in heated debates, each vying for power and influence. The unity that had fueled the revolution began to fracture. Enemies, both foreign and domestic, threatened the new republic. Monarchies across Europe formed coalitions to crush the revolution, while internal dissent and suspicion grew ever more intense. The revolutionaries responded with force, determined to defend their ideals at any cost. The stage was set for a period of turmoil as France struggled to define its future amidst chaos and hope. The year was 1793. The revolution entered its darkest phase, the Reign of Terror. Led by Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety, the government cracked down on anyone suspected of opposing the revolution. Trials were swift, and executions were many. The guillotine became a symbol of both justice and terror. Tens of thousands were killed, including Queen Marie Antoinette and many former revolutionaries. Fear gripped the nation. The ideals of liberty and equality seemed lost in a sea of blood. But even the terror could not last forever. In 1794, Robespierre himself was arrested and executed. The revolution had devoured its own children. With the fall of Robespierre, the revolution entered a new phase. A more moderate government, the Directory, took power. But instability continued. In 1799, a young general named Napoleon Bonaparte seized control, ending the revolution and beginning a new era. The French Revolution had changed France forever. The monarchy was gone. The old social order was shattered. Ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity had taken root. But the cost was immense. Hundreds of thousands dead, a nation in turmoil, and Europe plunged into years of war. Yet, the revolution's legacy endured. It inspired movements for freedom and democracy around the world. It showed that ordinary people could change history. The French Revolution was a tale of liberty and chaos, of hope and horror. It began with a dream of a better world and ended in blood and uncertainty. But its impact is still felt today in the rights we cherish and the struggles we face. As we look back on this dramatic chapter in history, we remember the power of ideas, the dangers of extremism, and the enduring quest for freedom. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the French Revolution.